What's the hardest subject in prelim?
Gen Chem.
Georgina, what's the hardest subject in prelim?
Gen Chem.
Jenny, what's the hardest subject in prelim?
Tanan-tanan.
Angel, what's the hardest subject this prelim?
Try ko. Pag ano, Chem.
Krisha, what's the hardest subject this prelim?
Chem o try ko.
Aina, what's the hardest subject this prelim?
Gen Chem.
Kate, what's the hardest subject this prelim?
Gen
Mayan, what's the hardest subject this prelim? Alea, what's the hardest subject this prelim?
Understanding the song.
Katrina, what's the hardest subject this prelim?
Try go.
Ikaw, Yashela, what's the hardest subject?
Chemistry.
Hey, Lovely, what's the hardest subject this prelim?
Chemistry.
Alisa, what's the hardest subject this prelim?
Tanan. Wala po.
Kathleen, what's the hardest subject this prelim? Alam. Kyla, what's the hardest subject this prelim? Chem. Nem, what's the hardest subject this prelim?
Chem ka try go.
Shera, what's the hardest subject this prelim?
Chem.
Jericho, what's the hardest subject this prelim? Janela, what's the hardest subject this prelim?
Chem.
Shane, what's the hardest subject this prelim?
Tanan. Pero mas
Daisy, what's the hardest subject this prelim?
try go.
Bros, what's the hardest subject this prelim?
Wala na iya. Wala na masyat ka sa computer.
Carlo, what's the hardest subject this prelim?
Try go.
Ikaw ya James, what's the hardest subject this prelim?
Hindi man nilukris kasi. Ang mata.
Eunice, what's the hardest subject this prelim?
Chem.
Dian, what's the hardest subject this prelim?
All of the above.
Ikaw Sarah, what's the hardest subject this prelim? Ha? Try go. Mart, what's the hardest subject this prelim?
Understanding the song.
Nicole, what's the hardest subject in prelim?
Iota.
Blight, ikaw wala ko na interview. What's the hardest subject this prelim?
Try go eh.
Shay, ikaw ya Shay, what's the hardest subject?